I never write my talk on slichot. Usually I reserve that for Rosh Hashanah, and I will do that as well on Rosh Hashanah day. But this is too important. This is too important, I thought, for me to just let myself meander around all that I really want to tell you, and then we'll be here until midnight. So I decided to do you a favor and to write it down so that I keep myself honest with the time. But I feel this is really critical and really important. I think it's a way for me to also set the tone and the theme for these high holidays. I've been thinking a lot about the notion of purpose. Maybe this is a particular time in my life that has brought me to reevaluate what purpose may mean for me right now. I turned 50 about a year and a half ago. And I was already feeling then that I needed to refocus my attention as I was entering into the last third of my life. And these past months have been a time of transition as well in my family life, as you well know, with both my kids now in college and my wife and I entering the empty nesting, or as our board president put it aptly, remote parenting stage of our life. And so tangled up in my wrestling with this notion of purpose for my life, of course, is the notion of purpose for my work. And when I challenge the purpose of my work, I also challenge the notions or ideas I have about the purpose of Bet Aleph as our community. It all goes together because, as we know, it really is all one. Interestingly enough, our board of directors are also having a conversation about purpose right now, looking at everything that happens at Bet Aleph through those lens of what is the purpose of this and what is the purpose of that, and is that aligned with who we are and what we want to do and accomplish as a community. Very critical and important conversations. And since this is the high holidays, and like I said, we have just been gifted 18 days for genuine introspection, the time is ripe, I believe, to dive into it more deeply for myself in particular, our community in general. And if this resonates with you as well as I hope for you and your own life. So with this preamble behind us now, I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about the famous Jewish concept of tikkun olam. What is it? What it isn't? And why we should embrace it as a profound, transformative spiritual practice. What tikkun olam isn't, I think it's best to start there. What tikkun olam isn't is what has unfortunately come to mean for most people, namely social activism. Most people understand tikkun olam to mean repairing the world, which is one of its meanings, to be sure, and use the concept as a banner to fight the good fight and combat whatever ill of society they feel most called to stand against. But for every left progressive social activist waving the tikkun olam banner, there is a right conservative social activist waving the exact same banner. You win some, you lose some. You win abortion rights in the 70s, you lose abortion rights in the 20s. You win a point for climate change in the Senate, you lose a point for climate change in the courts when the EPA is rendered incapacitated. And no, with all due respect, revered Reverend Martin Luther King, the arc of history is not bending toward justice. It is bending toward death and annihilation. And we Jews have spent the last 3,000 years at least writing the so-called arc of history, and it has bent toward the gas chambers and extermination camps. So let's just say that on that point, Mr. Luther King, we beg to differ. But why? Why has all the work over so many generations that has gone toward making the world a better place led to the gas chambers, led to the climate catastrophe that is now unraveling human civilization itself? Because all this time, and to this very day, we have continued to attack the symptoms. And as we learn, back in middle school, every action has only engendered an opposite reaction. We have never stopped and looked at the disease itself. The Hebrew expression tikkun olam has the word olam in it. And that word means world, universe, creation. While tikkun, the word tikkun means to straighten, to set in order. To translate tikkun as to fix or repair the world means that we hold the world as broken. And that is not a Jewish concept. Judaism, and especially Jewish mystics, see the work of every Jew as participating in the completion of creation. It's not broken, it's just not finished yet. It is still evolving. And according to Pirkei Avot, לא עליך המלאכה לגמור ולא אתה בן חורין להיבטל ממנה. We are not even required to complete the work of creation. We're just required to engage in the process itself. To see the world as unfinished is radically different than to see it as broken. And I want you to really feel into what I'm trying to say here. To feel that difference between the world is not yet finished, contrary to it is broken. Because the latter feels antagonistic, combative, heroic in a way, and therefore very much egotistic. I, me, myself, I'm going to fix it. It's broken. Let me step in and tell you how to right the wrongs. The former, conversely, feels much more humbly inviting to take our place in the multitude of those who are engaged in this process of contributing our small part to the evolution and completion of creation. Tikkun olam invites us to set things in order. That's what the word means. To straighten, to set in order. Because of the disease of the world, the illness of the world. What the world suffers from as the source of all symptoms is a massive case of psychological disorder. A dissociative mental illness. The illness of separateness. The ego, which is otherwise necessary and useful, has overstepped its bounds and has cemented itself in our consciousness as an existing, solidified, separate entity that has reshaped the world around it to be perceived as other, as alien, different from itself. A world out there somehow existing as well as solidified entities outside of ourself. And those entities often threatening the well-being of that separate sense of self, threatening its survival even. And therefore, this outer world has to be at best contained, controlled, or appeased, or at worst, it has to be dominated, it has to be manipulated, it has to be even sometimes eradicated. And it is this dissociative disorder that we all suffer from. And we have for millennia. And that is what has created a human-dominated world on the verge of total extinction. This disease, this disorder of separateness is at the core of our illness. And everything else is its symptoms. I really want, this has been a really long journey for me to get to what I just told you. But it's so clear to me at this point. What is at the core of all that ails our world, ourselves, and each other is the disorder, the psychological disorder of separateness. And if we keep understanding Tikkun Olam so narrowly as a form of social activism, unless we're able to shift our perspective away from this disorder of separateness, we actually will continue to attack the symptoms, but will never fix the underlying illness, the underlying disorder. Worse, because our social activism is operating from the perspective of separateness, we will continue to perpetuate and strengthen what we are paradoxically trying to change. And I've come to realize that, unfortunately, unless we as a species are able to transcend this alienating perspective of separation, the disease or disorder of otherness will only perpetuate what ails us, what ultimately will destroy us and everything in our human wake. And the faster our technology runs ahead of us and away from us, the faster our human civilization will tear itself apart and eventually implode. Now, as you know from previous talks and previous high holidays, I am not a man of hope. Hoping for me feels like we are kicking the can down the road and waiting for our circumstances to change or for some kind of savior to show up and change things for us. Because perhaps my life has been infused with Judaism and its teachings, I'm more of a na'aseh v'nishma kind of guy. Na'aseh v'nishma. When God in Torah thundered, Anochi, I am, as the first of the 10 commandments, we, the people, were overwhelmed by the unfathomableness of revelation with a capital R. It was vastly beyond our ken. So we turned to Moses and we said to Moses, you know, all that the Eternal has spoken, we'll do it. We'll do it, and then in the doing of it, we'll get it, we'll understand, but right now we're just going to do it. And that's what Judaism is at its core. Judaism is a praxis. Judaism is something we do, not something that requires belief. It is in the doing, in the practicing, that what God always reveals to us moment to moment becomes seen, becomes understood, becomes integrated so that we might be transformed. So what can we do? I have come to a place in my life where I am now convinced that embracing the path of deep spirituality, the path that supports our awakening to the oneness that is all, the practice that will allow us to transcend the illness of the separate sense of self, is what can still provoke the necessary shift in humanity's perspective to carve out a different course for our future. Now, there are many traditions and many modalities of practice that pursue this goal. Judaism is only one of them. But Judaism is my path. And Judaism is the one path I believe that also invites us to shift our perspective, to shift our consciousness. And that is specifically to be found in Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism. And it is therefore from that perspective that I come to the practice of Tikkun Olam. Not as the fixing of a broken world, but rather the participating in its reordering. Since Rabbi Isaac Luria in the 1600s and the Kabbalistic school of Tzfat in northern Israel, our mystics' invitation has been to see the sparks of the divine in everyone and everything. To take a disenchanted world and discover once again its sacredness, its holiness. Tikkun Olam, from the mystical perspective, is a practice to know the holy from the illusion of anything being mundane. Nothing is mundane. There is no such a thing as mundane. And as we shared in the final blessing of the Havdalah we just did, we said between that which is holy and that which is not yet holy. You remember that? It is not yet holy because our egos, our separate sense of self, judges it to be so. Because our separate sense of self needs it to be so because it doesn't see itself as holy. But the entirety of spiritual practice, especially of Tikkun Olam, is to erase these two words, not yet. To erase these two words, not yet, because everything and everyone is already sacred, already holy. But we have yet to transcend the illusion of separation that would allow us to see that it all is absolutely, gorgeously, totally sacred and holy. Everything, everyone, including us, including you. You are the divine sparks that is animated within you. This animated spark is the life you live. The mystical practice of Tikkun Olam invites us to redeem these sparks, meaning to realize God as expressing through it all, at all times and everywhere. Interbeingness is the thread, the tapestry of our universe. Nothing exists apart from anything else. Everything is a part in a greater whole. Everything is a part in a greater whole that itself is a part of a greater whole. And it's that way, parts becoming whole, that becomes part of other wholes, all the way up and all the way down. Reality is a nested reality, from the unfathomably small to the unfathomably large. Which brings me to the theme of these high holidays, in the book of life. How do we truly write ourselves in the proverbial book of life? Not just ourselves, but the whole of humanity. And here we tie this question back to our original contemplation of purpose. Because right now it seems to me that we as humanity are continuing to write ourselves in the book of death while getting very close to authoring the final chapters of the book. To write ourselves in the book of life, because any shift in global consciousness can only start with who we are, you and me, where we are right here, right now. It is for each of us to commit to this spiritual practice of tikkun olam. Any practice that can break the spell of separateness is a practice that, as far as I'm concerned, can save the world from self-destruction, can truly heal the deep wounds of humanity. Meditation is, of course, one of these practices. And I'm going to be a little grandiose here, but I think belonging to a community such as ours, such as this one, with this message of oneness, of absolute unity and complete holiness that is hammered over and over and over again, every Shabbat, every holy day, because we need to be reminded over and over again. This community of ours, this precious glorious Bet Aleph of ours, is another sliver of the Tikkun Olam spectrum of practices. So here you have it. A year and a half since my 50th birthday, wrestling with this process, I have come to discern the beginning of a purposeful path forward. A dear friend of mine for my 50th birthday bought me this silver bracelet. I wonder if the camera could zoom in on my bracelet as close as possible. This was before I started to engage in this ongoing journey of discernment and introspection that brought me here tonight. Inscribed on this bracelet are the words Tikkun Olam in Hebrew. And on the day that I received it, it was just another lovely piece of jewelry that, I thought I would wear from time to time when the mood was striking. But now it is what is constantly in front of me. It is my reminder of my purpose. So may we find it in ourselves to take on our journey toward transcending this separate disease of separation, this disease of separateness, that we might write ourselves and the world, God willing, in the book of life. Amen.